Hello. In this video, we will take a look at how do we use the comparison operators in PowerShell. Let's get started. Let's declare a variable called num1 and let's just assign it as a value 50, and let's call another variable and assign it as a value of 20. Now let's start comparing these two numbers. So first let us compare the number 1. If number 1 is equals, as you can see, eq, this is how you compare the numbers in PowerShell. So you say number 1 equals number 2, and if that's the case, we would like to write host on the output that numbers are equal. We will put else condition and let us just say that numbers are not equal. All right, so let's go ahead and execute this, and as you can see, numbers are not equal because 50 is really not 20. Let's change it back to 50. Now both the numbers are equal. Let's execute this. Numbers are equal. Again, change it back to any other number and execute it, and you would see numbers are not equal. Now let's go ahead and see how do we compare the less than operator. So to compare the less than, all you need to do is you would say lt, which is less than, and here we need to just change the message, and you would call it number 1 is less than number 2. And if that's not the case, then all we need to do is we'll put a message number 1 is not less than number 2, right? So let's go ahead and execute this, and as you can see, number 1 is not less than number 2 because number 1 is really 50 and number 2 is 30. Let's just say if we change it back to 20, and let's execute this, and now you will see number 1 is less than number 2, right? Because 20 is less than 30, and this is how you compare the two numbers using the less than operator. Now let's just change a little bit and let's say LE, which stands for less than or equals to. So if that's the case, number 1 is less than or equals to number 2, we will say number 1 is less than or equals to number 2, and otherwise we will say that number 1 is not less than or equals to number 2. All right, let's go ahead and execute this, and you will see number 1 is less than or equals to number 2. Yes, it is. And let's put both the number as 20. You will say number 1 is still less than or equals to number 2, and now let's change it to 30, and you will say number 1 is not less than or equals to number 2. Right? So this is how you can work with the less than or equals to. Now let us check how do we work with greater than. So you will replace this with GT. GT is greater than. If the number 1 is greater than number 2, the number 1 is greater than number 2, or else number 1 is not greater than number 2, right? So number greater than number 2. All right, so we do have number 1 is greater than number 2. So let's execute this, and you will see number 1 is greater than number 2, right? Let's put it as 10, and you would see a different message. Number 1 is not greater than number 2. Let's have both of them as equal, and again you would see number 1 is not greater than number 2 because they are really equal. So that's why number 1 is greater than number 2 is not kind of a true, and that's the reason it gets to number 1 is not greater than number 2, right? All right, now greater than or equals to, so we just change from T to E, that greater than or equals to, and we do have both the numbers as equal. So let's go ahead and just change a message so that it's more relevant. Number 1 is greater than or equals to number 2. Number 1 is not greater than or E and or equals to, just like a tongue twister, it's the keyboard twister for me. All right, number 2, let's go ahead and execute this. So number 1 is greater than or equals to number 2. And if you just change it, you would see number 1 is not greater than or equals to number 2, right? Because we have both the numbers as different. Now there's one more operator called not equals to, so let's understand that as well. And the way we write is NE, which is not equals to. So of course, if the number 1 is not equals to number 2, we will say number 1 is not equals to number 2. And if it is equal, the number 1 is equals to number 2, right? This is not equals to. So let's go ahead and execute this. And because both the numbers are different, number 1 is not equals to number 2. If you also change this back to 25, execute this, and of course both the numbers are same. So number 1 is equals to number 2, satisfying the if condition, right? So I hope this simple tutorial helped you to understand all the comparison operators. Less than or equal to, greater than or equals to, and not equals to. I thank you for watching the video.